we need to, I was going to say look into, but let's be honest, we know the answer already, into the reason why Gabriella Montez was being blamed for so many things. And the answer to that is the status quo and patriarchy at the end of the day. Now, in High School Musical, Gabriella really is kind of like, maybe you could say she's the first domino in the domino effect of Troy being brave enough to break the status quo, right? They sing together on New Year's Eve. Gabriella coincidentally ends up going to the same school as Troy. And he really, now that he has Gabriella by his side, feels inspired to kind of pursue the musical. And when Gabriella is around, Troy gets the courage to do kind of what he actually wants to do, right? He discovered he enjoys singing and he wants to at least try out for the musical and see if this is something that he likes to do. And everyone is pushing back on him because the status quo, because patriarchy, right? We see a lot of the commentary in this being like, you know, theater is too girly. Chad is like, well, they're gonna have you up there in a leotard. Oh my gosh, you don't want to do that. And the amazing thing about Gabriella is her story really showcases, you know, when it comes to evaluating what the status quo of society is and what it takes to break that, how amazing is it to just have someone by your side that supports you no matter what and is there to help prompt you up and helps give you the courage to do things, right? And ultimately, at the end of the day, the lesson of High School Musical is Troy needs to evaluate the status quo and breaking free of it on his own. It is amazing that he has Gabriella for that support and to gain courage from. But right at the end of the day, for example, fast forward to High School Musical 3 in Scream, right, where he is just like, I'm hearing all the voices of people telling me what I should do or shouldn't do. And at the end of the day, I gotta really think, damn, what do I want to do? And then I gotta say, I gotta do it, right? I gotta stand 10 toes down on it and say, okay, you know what? I am gonna do the musical, but I also am gonna do basketball. We know this is the thing of the status quo and all the things that push the status quo, right? We all police each other to keep to the status quo and also saying that we should not talk about it, right? It is better by far to keep things as they are. Don't mess with the flow. No, stick to the status quo, right? If we police ourselves and other people into it, then the quote unquote natural order that people want, that people don't want, but some people want, can just go on freely without ever actually doing the hard part and questioning ourselves. As we dive into the Gabriella Montez of it all, one thing is very clear about the status quo, right? We don't want it disrupted because why? Because it challenges people's power, people's place that they hold. It also challenges how we think, right? How we have been brought up to think, right? Because it's not that, you know, as progressive as some people may be, at the end of the day, you cannot deny the effects that the status quo has on people, right? And we have to really sit with ourselves and evaluate how we have placed ourselves and others into the status quo in our lifetime. And we have to work on breaking free of that. And because we still live in a society, especially now, look at who's fucking office, that dumbass, really that doesn't even capture what I think of that man. Literally horrendous, right? We think of what status quo you're trying to keep. Who is that actually benefiting, right? Because you can't ask yourself the hard question and deconstruct where these things have come from, right? People don't like to be challenged, right? Because Troy, we were witnessing his story of him being forced to challenge himself, right? He's taking, you know, a leap into the musical, right? And yes, he has the support of Gabriella, but one person is not enough, right? Especially when everybody, right, is trying to police you back into the status quo, which we see happen in the first High School Musical, right? And even by High School Musical 3, they kind of treat his musical endeavors as kind of like, well, you got that out of your system. That was a one-time thing. So now you know you're going to go do basketball, right? Where Troy really has to ask himself, like, wait, I actually do really like this and I actually would like to pursue this. And at the end of the day, something to note about High School Musical, you can try something new at any time, at any age, right? What is the reason, part of the status quo, right, that we feel like we can't jump into something new? And just a sidebar, mentioning the capitalism kind of thought process in how we decide what we're going to do, right? And although that is not like a direct screaming out loud thing that you see in High School Musical, it is a part of it, right? Because this idea that the status quo of it all, right? that you cannot try something new. And also what you do try, right? You have to be fully dedicated to, you want to make a career out of, you can't just do it for fun, right? And that is something that we see a lot, right? And it's probably the pressure that everybody has felt, right? How have you felt about how you spend your time? And if I make this hobby profitable, then that makes more sense. And then if it's not profitable, is it actually worth my time? And that is a great question that I think to ask, everyone should ask themselves, regarding like how they feel about the things they do in their free time, right? Because reality is, you don't have to make money in all of your free time. Obviously it'd be very nice because, well, we all need money at the end of the day to survive in this world, right? Unfortunately. But at the end of the day, you are allowed to enjoy and want to do something, whether you're going to be dedicated and pursue a career in it, whether you're going to be good at it. Like, I could be like, I want to be a singer, but I obviously don't sing well, right? Like, I could still do that, right? I can't paint for shit, but I could still be like, I'm going to paint in my free time if I wanted to, right? And it could look like shit. It could look like a 3-year-old did it, but I'm still allowed to do that, right? And that's what people forget. And that's the status quo of it all. So to finally get into what this video is about, because, you know, with High School Musical, there's always so much to talk about. And I feel like we have to take all of these things into consideration before we get into the subject, because it really does all intersect at the end of the day. When we talk about Gabriella being blamed for how Troy's acting, we are all our own people, right? And it is amazing that we can take inspiration and get courage from these type of people who give us a place to allow us to be ourselves, to then go forward and actually do the thing that we wanted to do that we maybe were a little too afraid to. And every time Troy wants to do something for himself, right? Who gets blamed? Gabriella. And is that not the misogyny in all of it? When you think about throughout history, when it comes to, I'm thinking particularly married people, right? It comes to like, yeah, I can't, my wife said no, like, you know, blaming it on the woman as if it is not something that you, as an individual, can choose to do, and you have a personal responsibility, right? It is not just someone saying, well, this is what you have to do, right? Gabriella's not saying, well, you need to try out for the musical, and everybody is just, and Troy's just, you know, whipped and is following along with what she says, right? She is just there to encourage Troy and be supportive. And isn't that interesting that everything gets blamed on Gabriella, but it's like, God forbid she just be a supportive person. Oh my God, y'all wish y'all had that. Y'all wish y'all had that. Like, not everybody does, and that is so beautiful. And honestly, Troy and Gabriella were cute, and we will get into that later on. I promise there's a point to loop around back to all of this. So in the rooftop scene, we hear this very interesting dialogue that really lays out my point. Remember in kindergarten how you'd meet a kid and know nothing about them, then 10 seconds later you play like your best friends because you didn't have to be anything but yourself? Singing with you felt like that. Okay, this is laying the groundwork to establish what I have been saying this whole time. Gabriella provides that platform for Troy to feel courage to be himself and actually explore the things that maybe he hasn't really felt like he could, right? Because anytime Troy wanted to do something, everybody's singing stick to the status quo. Like, oh my gosh, Troy, you decided you were singing, all of a sudden, everybody is admitting they like things. Martha likes to pop and lock. Zeke likes to bake. Oh my God. Which is like, y'all should be letting Zeke bake, because couldn't he do bake fundraisers to get money for the Wildcats? See, this is what happens when you stick to the status quo. You're not thinking like that. You're not thinking like that. Creme brulees for everyone. No matter what, there will always be pressures of the status quo. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. And I don't say that's just the way it is as in you accept that. I just mean that it's gonna feel a little bit more complicated, right? Because High School Musical is a story of people breaking free of the status quo and also feeling the pressures of it and conforming and kind of realizing how this is the forever work, and you're really going to have to really be diligent about that throughout your lifetime, because these roadblocks will continue to come up, but you really do have to stand 10 toes down in what you believe in and break free of that and do the best you can despite what the reaction is. And that is how you break free of the status quo. So we know Troy is trying out for the musical. They think that Gabriella is the one pushing him to do this, which I think is interesting. Gabriella really just goes along with it for the fun to be with Troy, and they enjoyed singing together. And there's nothing wrong with that. You can just like to do that for fun, right? You can just like to do that for fun. It doesn't have to turn into anything serious. But what's the most interesting thing out of all of this is that Troy was the only one looking to really pursue musicals in that way, right? He was the one at the end that's like, I choose music and basketball, right? Gabriella is just there for the ride, right? She's just there to do it because it's fun to do with Troy. Because remember, Troy was actually the one who showed up to the auditions, was hiding behind a mop, and then Gabriella eventually filtered in and was like, why are you hiding, right? And she is the one eventually who's like, I like to audition, and Miss Darvis says it's too late. They sing anyways. They end up getting a call back because Miss Darvis overheard them singing. Yada, yada, yada. Doesn't matter at the end of the day because Troy wants to pursue music and he's allowed to do that, whether it ends up being a serious career for him or not. So everybody in his life is dealing with, they are learning something new about Troy and they're not liking it. They're like, no, let's just go back to the way things were, stick to the status quo. And listen, unfortunately, Troy, he is the captain, okay? And he has missed some practices. And who is that on? Who is that on? That's on Troy. That's on Troy. Is that on Gabriella? No, that's on Troy, right? Because we can all sit here and say, he is captain. He does have a bigger commitment in that way, right? And yes, he did miss some practice to sing with Gabriella, right? And it's not here to do, to moralize this in a big, well, Troy was really in the wrong there, because at the end of the day, who cares? But also in the way that, okay, yes, if you're taking on another extracurricular, it certainly becomes difficult to manage both. However, Troy is responsible for figuring out how he's going to get around that, right? He could have been like, oh, this is not a good time to practice. Can we do this a different time? Like, surely there's got to be a different time in their schedule, even if it's not in school, to practice for the musical, right? Practice for the audition, sorry. So like Troy could have done that. Troy could have done that, right? So we get this from Coach, okay? Detention was my fault, Dad, not hers. Okay, referring to the beginning of High School Musical where all their phones go off because Troy texts Gabriella because he thinks he sees Gabriella from New Year's, right? And it's like, is that her? I gotta text her. And then her phone rang, and then obviously everybody whose phone went out got detention, right? So that actually was Troy's fault, mind you. You haven't missed practice in 3 years. That girl shows up. That girl is named Gabriella. She's very nice. Helping you miss practice doesn't make her very nice. Not in my book or your team. So once again, who is responsible for that? Troy. Even if Gabriella is like aware that he is missing practice, all she can do is be like, oh, you're missing practice? You sure you don't want to do this and that? Right? He is the person choosing to do that, right? Like, why are we blaming Gabriella? Dad, she's not a problem. She's just a girl. Exactly. What is she doing? She's existing, and people are saying she's a problem. But you're not just a guy, Troy. You're the team leader. What you do affects not only this team, but the entire school. And without you completely focused, we're not going to win next week. The championship games, they don't come along all the time. There's something special. Okay. Well, yeah, Dad, well, a lot of things are special. But you're a playmaker, not a singer, right? Do you ever think that maybe I could be both? Sorry, I really fumbled through that, but I'm not re-recording that. This is interesting because once again, something that happens throughout all of High School Musical, like I said, I'm aware Troy was captain, right? He had more in the game. And yes, I understand what people are saying, but once again, this is Troy's fault, right? Not anyone else's, right? This is at best, a time management issue, right? A time management issue at the very least. And that is about it. It's not the end of the world. You can, like I said, he's the captain, right? So he does have more commitment there. But like I said, it ain't anyone's problem but Troy's. Right? This girl came along. Yeah, because this girl came along and helped inspire him, give him the courage to pursue something he wanted to do. God forbid he fuck up the time management of it all. He's like, what, 16? None of this is the end of the world, but it kills me. Also, something that happens in High School Musical a lot is they're so dependent on Troy, because listen, he is a great basketball player, I guess, in this movie. But I just go, there are other people on the team. You will not function without the captain there. I don't know. I don't know. That's something to think about. That's a sidebar. The funny, but also not funny, part of it all is when we get to chat. and what he thinks of Gabriella, right? Because he is also being like, this girl comes in and all of a sudden, what? He says, what spell has this elevated IQ temptress girl cast that suddenly makes you want to be in a musical? Gabriella's a witch, confirmed, hashtag confirmed by Chad. Elevated IQ temptress, right? That the idea that a woman can tempt a man to act a certain way and it would be her fault. That she put a spell on somebody. It is truly so funny to me because it's like, oh my God, like, God forbid he's encouraged to try to be authentically himself, to try to figure out what that is and what he likes, because they're in high school. Like, as much as you think you know yourself, there is truly so much to learn throughout your life and through different facets of your life, right? Like, there might be a part of your life that you may not care about something, and then 20 years down the line you do. And whether that's attributed to it just wasn't interesting at the time and now it is, or even just in the way the status quo prevents us from really feeling like we can explore these things, right? Like, that is something that anyone can relate to. But it is just so funny that we're like, what has this woman done to you? Surely, it can't be that this is your decision, because it must be the woman, right? Like, that is so crazy to me. And also, to speak on some more funny misogyny. I don't know that I want to say that, but let's just listen to what Chad says here. This is, to me, hilarious though. Have you ever seen Michael Crawford on a cereal box? Who's Michael Crawford? Exactly my point. He was the Phantom of the Opera on Broadway. Now, my mom, she's seen that musical 27 times, and she puts Michael Crawford's picture in our refrigerator. Yeah, not on it, in it. So point is, if you play basketball, you're going to end up on a cereal box. If you sing in musicals, you're going to end up in my mom's refrigerator. Why would she put his picture in her refrigerator? One of her crazy diet ideas. Look, I don't intend to understand the female mind, Troy. It's frightening territory. Like, this is like genuinely so fucking funny, because what are we even talking about? Now, here's the thing, guys. I wonder, and here's the thing, this movie came out in 2006. I don't think that people would care about being on a lunchbox. Oh my God, a cereal box these days. But when we were younger, cereal was cooler. Do kids still like cereal? Like, not in that obviously they would like cereal, but like, you know, like when your mom would buy Lucky Charms, you're like, hell yeah, Lucky Charms today. You know what I mean? And I just wonder if the kids of this generation care about something like that. I don't know the answer. If you do, please feel free to leave it in the comments. But that's just something to think of. Now I have never heard of that. Putting a man's picture in a refrigerator. Now, for a diet idea. For what? Did she feel like she needed to be skinny for him? And that's really what I'm worried about. And we should talk about that. It's not really relevant to well, it is relevant. I don't want to say it's irrelevant, because it's not. But just not something we touch on in High School Musical literally at all. But was that it? Or is this just like a, you know, like back in the day, people would decorate their lockers kind of like you would like decorate your room, right? With like little posters of things you liked and such like that. So are we doing that with our fridges now? Honestly, I think it was she was trying to look skinny for Michael Crawford from Phantom of the Opera. I really am scared that was it. And this was 2006, so honestly, that would check out. I really do think it might have been that. That was just a side tangent at the end of the day, but like, it's something to think about. It's something to think about. He doesn't understand the female mind. It's frightening territory. It's like, it actually kills me. Because like, yes, like it is misogynistic at the end of the day. Like, when you think about how boys specifically, and women too, but like when you think about how boys specifically are raised to view these things, right? It starts at such a young age, the status quo of it all, right? This stuff is taught. At the end of the day. So we get someone like Chad, who's like 16, and thinks this way. How can you expect the rest of us to be focused on a game if you're off somewhere in leotards singing Twinkletown? Now, they can't think of Troy in a leotard. This is what they assume theater is. And theater is so much more than that, but also, so what if he is? When I read leotards, I was immediately thinking, does anyone, well, he wasn't wearing a leotard. That was like a full body suit, I thought. Because it's not like no, I don't think it was a leotard. I think it was like a full body. It was what's the word I'm looking for? Slim to his body? What's the word? Like, actually, none of this matters. I was thinking about Joe Jonas doing the single ladies dance, is what I was thinking. But I don't think he was wearing a leotard. I don't think the legs were out. I think the legs were covered. So now we get to the point of people believing that Gabriella does not have Troy's best interest in mind. And mind you, they are in high school, right? And everybody is responsible for their own future in the sense that, like, it is not Gabriella's responsibility in any regard to be like, Troy, you have to do this. This is what's right for you. Is it? No, it's really not. It's really not. Like, she's a 16-year-old girl, 17-year-old girl, whatever. Like, everybody's doing their own thing, right? Gabriella was doing her own thing so she could eventually get into early acceptance for Stanford. And Troy is doing his own thing, trying to figure out what the hell he wants to do, right? Now, there's also a note in the way that sometimes we don't allow ourselves to feel like we have these opportunities because we're so unsure, right? In High School Musical 3, Miss Jarvis threw Troy's name into the running for the Juilliard Scholarship, right? In a way that Troy didn't even know who did that until later on in the movie, and he wasn't really giving theater a real shot until that happened. He's like, maybe I could do this, right? Maybe I do actually want to do this. But even going back to specifically High School Musical 2, this is the movie where Troy is learning a lesson on the status quo privilege at the end of the day, right? He knows he doesn't like Sharpay. He knows nothing is going to go further. He knows that she likes her, and she is giving him all of these privileges, right, that could maybe further his career along the way and get him into school and get him in with the Red Hawks, the team of U of A, which he had really wanted to go to, right? And he doesn't realize how he's both abandoning himself and all of the people he cares about, right? This is a story about the status quo of privilege. That's why we get Ben on it, when he kind of realizes what he did wrong and who he actually wants to be and how he's going to move forward doing that, right? He is someone who wants to stand up for what is right and wants to make it right and say, sorry, you can't do this anymore. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to break the status quo. We're all in this together at the end of the day, right? That is something you take from High School Musical. So Troy has taken Gabriella on a picnic. He has jumped in the pool and they had their little fun swimming around after hours, right? Because Gabriella was a lifeguard at Lava Springs. And all of these times they are getting in trouble, right? Because Troy has initiated these things, right? And it's not, like I said, it's not here to say whether they were right or wrong to be swimming in the Lava Springs pool after hours, whether they should have been taking their picnic to the golf course. At the end of the day, who gives a fuck whether that was right or wrong? At the end of the day, they're going to get in trouble because Troy started these things, right? It's not to say anything against Troy, because like I said, nobody cares that they're doing this shit, right? They're teenagers having fun in the summer at a country club. Who cares? But what happens is when Sharpay and Gabriella hash it out, right? And I say hash it out lightly. It was sick. I loved that moment. Gabriella had truly such a moment in that movie. But like at the end of the day, Sharpay was like, see, this is what happens because you're the reason that you're messing with Troy's future. You're the reason this is happening. Da-da-da-da. Like I know what's best for Troy. I'm going to give him all these privileges and you are messing with that. Mind you, Gabriella, the whole summer, minding her business. Gabriella is truly minding her business. That's why she says, gotta go my own way. Because she's just like, I'm going to let Troy do what he's doing. And at some point, he's no longer himself. And I'm going to say, love ya. I know we had the best intentions starting off here, but I got to go my own way. It just ain't right anymore. Right? She was just letting him do his own thing. Like, I don't know. Well, I know what's going on because it's Sharpay. But it's just like, Gabriella was kind of killer in High School Musical too. She was. She just said, you do you, I do me, and sometimes we're not going to end up going down the same path together, and that's just how it is. But Sharpay says, you've gotten him written up by Fulton for sneaking on the golf course, swimming after hours. I had to step in just to save Troy's job. Now, let's run that back for a second. Sharpay wanted Troy in whatever way she could get him away from everybody, right? And the thing is that she got Fulton to call Troy and be like, hey, we have this job opportunity for you, right? And he says, wait, I know a girl. She's great. Straight A's, da-da-da. She'd be perfect for this job. And he ends up getting Gabriella and all of the Wildcats jobs at Lava Springs, right? Troy uses his little privilege that he doesn't know he's getting from Sharpay to get everyone jobs. So that's why Sharpay ends up freaking out when she goes there and she's like, no, Gabriella's a lifeguard. The Wildcats are coming into work. Like, I thought it was just going to be me and Troy this summer, right? And she's like, oh my God. And at the end of the day, once she hears the Wildcats are there, she goes to Fulton and is like, what happened here? And he's like, you literally said whatever it takes to get Troy here to do it, right? And obviously that was hiring everybody he knows, right? And she says, if you can't fire them, make them want to quit. Okay? Troy's job was never at risk. Because why? Because Sharpay and her family own Lava Springs. And if if Troy was gonna be fired, let him be fired. Let him be fired. Right? Hello? But was he fired? No. Sharpay's family gave him all of these privileges, right? They gave Troy a literal promotion, a raise, access to the benefits of the country club, right? He had his own locker. He had his own new nice shoes that could get polished. Like, was Troy's job ever at risk? No, it was not. This is all misogyny from different levels, right? We see it from the men, we see it from the women, right? Because that is part of the status quo of patriarchy, right? It doesn't just affect the way men act towards women. It also acts how women see themselves. It acts how women act towards other women. And we see that from Sharpay, especially when you are in a position of privilege like Sharpay, right? Who can try to hold this over her head. And Gabriella's like, at the end of the day, I don't really give a fuck that I got a job here. I'm leaving anyways. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because Gabriella leaves after that, mind you. But how often do we see women get blamed for men's decisions? In various ways. And this, at the end of the day, is just the status quo of patriarchy chiming in from all different corners of the world, right? In High School Musical 3, right? We see this happen when we are just watching a really adorable, cute relationship, high school relationship that Troy and Gabriella are having. Okay, and that's allowed. You're allowed to have that. You are allowed to have a cute little high school romance, right? And if they want to take it outside of college, they absolutely can, right? But something that happens, and the pressure of the status quo, right, of the future, trying to figure out what you're going to do, how you're going to move forward, right? It's like, okay, where am I going to school next? What is the career I'm looking to pursue, right? And I thought this was very interesting in the way that one thing that happens is Gabriella gets early acceptance to Stanford, and she was honestly keeping this from Troy because she just knew Troy was going to tell her, like, obviously you have to go. You can't stay here. You have to go. And they had already made commitments to do the musical. And also they just care about each other. So it's like, okay, I'm going to be moving away from someone that I care about, right? And when, Troy finally confronts Gabriella, is like, hey, I know you've been keeping this from me, like, right? And she's like, well, maybe I could defer and I could go to U of A for a little bit and then I could go to Stanford. And he's like, no, obviously go to Stanford. Obviously, girl, go to Stanford. Because why? Because they both provide that space to encourage them to do what is right for them, right? No matter what that means for the rest of them, right? The future is uncertain, and it's tough because obviously they want to stay together. I think Troy and Gabriella are truly so cute together. Like, they're wholesome to me. I'm sorry, you can find them cringy, you can think whatever you want. I think it was cute, right? But something that happens is, so often with women tend to follow men around statistically. That just is the truth. So I thought it was so interesting, that we have something that, like, Gabriella was going to consider hanging with Troy at U of A for a little bit and then going to Stanford. But he was like, no, obviously do what you gotta do. Like, you are so smart. You deserve your future too. Hello? Like, he was supportive of that. And that's amazing. We're like, not everybody gets that opportunity, right? And that's tough to say goodbye to people you want to be around, right? Because this was the first time I think everybody has felt like this, like, they like to be together. They encourage each other to be more themselves and pursue what they want to do. And that's the thing of the status quo. And sometimes we feel the pressure that affects our ability to do that, right? And here we're kind of seeing an opposite of Troy being like, oh my God, like we're going to be however many miles away they were saying they were going to be away from each other, right? And he's not only contemplating, what the hell am I going to do, basketball or theater, but he's also thinking like, damn, I'm going to be so far away from Gabriella, right? And something that we see from Chad is be like, it's just a girl. It's just a girl at the end of the day. Doesn't matter. Like, it's actually so funny because, like, at the end of every movie, everybody gets along, everybody's cool with one another, and then Chad's like, whatever, she's just a girl, you know, like, there'll be more girls in the future, da da da, like, you gotta do you gotta pursue your thing, right? Your future is more important than this girl you like in high school, which is genuinely so interesting to me, and I feel like that is part of the misogyny of it all. But at the end of the day, like I said, something like they truly were such a cute couple. I do think they were wholesome. I 100% do. May they have a codependency issue, maybe from Troy, maybe from both of their sides. In the future, yes, but at the end of the day, they're in high school, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Us trying to be like, what would Troy and Gabriella be like down the line? I don't know. I don't know. This is interesting because Troy ends up going to a school that's much closer to Gabriella so that he will be able to see Gabriella more often than he would, obviously, if he was in Arizona. I was trying to think about where they were versus her being in California, right? And this is so interesting. And I think part of the reason I've said it's not all misogyny in this, right? It's part of, but not the whole picture, right? Is that when we deal with the status quo, we are also dealing with the grief of the status quo, the grief of the time that has passed that we weren't able to fully explore ourselves. Who would we have been without the pressures of the status quo, right? But also our futures without the status quo, right? And our futures with people, right? Our relationships to people under the status quo, right? Because I think of, Chad and Troy were like, we're the boys, we're besties, and we're besties. They never said they're besties, but those are besties. Those are besties. And Chad wasn't a great bestie, but like they were besties at the end of the day. They were always like, we're gonna play basketball together one day. They're both gonna go to U of A, right? That's why Chad, especially in High School Musical 2, was so hurt because Chad at the end of the day was like, wow, like you didn't even introduce me to the Red Hawks. Like I'm not even asking like for you to throw my name in the mix so maybe they hear it. I'm just being like, we have dreamed of playing together on the Red Hawks someday because we were like, oh, we're gonna go to U of A for college, right? And you didn't even introduce me to them, right? And even in the basketball court scene in High School Musical 3, he's like, we're gonna play you at some point, yes, and then that's good, right? They call it, they're bros, they hug it out, and they're like, because they're still gonna see each other in the circuit of playing basketball, college basketball at the end of the day. But right, it is that grief, that dream, that we had. How cool would it be if we were the best friends, we've known each other since we were kids, and we get to play on the same team together, doing a dream that we had since we were young, right? And you almost have to let go of that, right? That is part of letting go of the status quo, growing up. It's sad, but it's part of it, right? But that's the thing with the status quo. So much affects our ability to really process these things. And that's why people stay policing themselves and other people into the status quo. Because isn't it harder for us to acknowledge all of these intersecting things and then really address them head on than to just keep going the way things are going? And we know at the end of this day, even those who benefit, right? They do have benefits of the status quo. Still are suffering from it at the end of the day, right? They may not face the same adversities as other people, and that's why it's so important to advocate for deconstructing the status quo and what that looks like on every single level, right? From how we think about ourselves, how we think about others, and who we vote for, right? What policies we want to help everybody, right? Because without addressing the root issues, nothing will really be solved at the end of the day. But, take this from High School Musical. The amazing thing about shows and movies that showcase these things, right? Whether that was the intention or not of the creators of High School Musical is neither here nor there because these movies and stuff are telling of a society that we live in, whether they are intentionally telling a story or this is just like how they wrote things out, right? We see how we can connect all of these things to our real life and then challenge ourselves to think about our relationship to that, how we can deconstruct that, how we have been poor at doing things sometimes, and how we've been really great at doing things sometimes. And that is something everyone will face. Everyone has faced the problem of the status quo, right? That is not something that is unique to Troy Bolton in any way, shape, or form. And that is what we see of High School Musical, right? It is part of the thing is that everyone has been guilty of policing both themselves and other people to the status quo, right? We see very different levels, right? From Gabriella to Troy, his friends to Sharpay, the ways that we police other people and we police ourselves into the status quo, right? But everyone is guilty of it, right? Guilty as charged for literally everybody. And taking a moment to really look at the way we think about these things, right? Obviously, I covered a lot of the status quo today, but also, like I was specifically talking about, the misogyny in the status quo, right? Why are we blaming all of these things on Gabriella? Well, that's because Gabriella just happened to be the first domino in the domino effect of things that like really brought this joy to East High, right? And that like she provided that courage to Troy that inspired Troy to try to break free of the status quo together with Gabriella. And how did that impact everyone, right? The people who actually got to work together, right, and learn that we're all in this together, that we can work together to break free of the status quo, to stand up against oppressive systems, right? Like the things that Sharpay was trying to throw in, the obstacles in the Wildcats' way from accomplishing what they wanted to, right? We can work together and accomplish that and show that, like, we do have the power when we want to address that. And when we want to work together on that, right? Because the status quo isn't just broken by an individual, it is collective. It is collective. We all need to think about the ways that affects us and how we approach things in the world and even ourselves. And by analyzing the ways that we see this in High School Musical, whether it be from any facet of the story, right? Like today was mostly talking about the misogyny, in the approach to Gabriella, is that if you are someone who questions the system or aims to be supportive in a place where they want people to stay in the box of what they are, right? Obviously, you are going to be called a problem. We could read the history books and see how that happens in so many different ways. Gabriella, is not this big, like, I don't even know. Like, she's not like she's like this big advocate by any means, right? But it just shows the small little things that can really thrust us into wanting to break free of the status quo, right? Having someone by your side to give you that courage can just be sometimes the oomph that somebody needs to really accomplish something like that and break the status quo to figure out what they want to do, right? And that is so amazing. And that is why it's so powerful. And that is why she was deemed a problem. So it's really important to think about these things. And I think this is just fun to analyze High School Musical. Obviously, I loved High School Musical. And I don't know, High School Musical is really dope. And I think we can really use this to, at the end of the day, just evaluate how these things operate, right? It is certainly not the only piece of media that showcases that, but how cool is that? Like, this movie came out when I was 11, right? Like, you think I was thinking intricately about this at 11? No. But, right, we need these stories and we need the very various variations of these stories, right? To really see how this impacts and to make us think, how we can relate this to the real world, right? I think that It's Not That Deep crowd is really fucking lame. I'm sorry y'all don't want to have fun and critically think for a moment. And if you don't want to think about the ways that we can relate art, whether it was intended that way or not, to how we go about the world, like, I'm sorry, that's boring for you. That must be really boring for you because we can use these things as conversation starters at the end of the day. And I like to say I use this because sometimes people get defensive. Think of the status quo. People are very defensive. People get defensive when you bring these things up as is, but maybe through musicals, High School Musical, we can really kind of start to get ready and have these conversations that people have been having forever, and but bad things keep happening. And it's really unfortunate that more people don't want to break free of the status quo and don't want to have those questions, don't want to answer those hard questions to themselves, right? And I also don't think like you should have to look to a piece of media to try to feel comfortable enough to finally challenge yourself to ask yourself those questions, because at the end of the day, right to comfort is a tenet of white supremacy. Look that up. But we don't need to tiptoe around it. Like, I'm not someone to tiptoe around it, but I really do want to bring up, you know there is a lot of moralizing going on at the internet, and I'm not talking about moralizing against the people who like are genuinely horrible. I'm talking about the people who, if you don't get it right, um, who are like, oh my God, it's all or nothing, right? Either or thinking. And at the end of the day, everybody has this stuff to deconstruct, right? No one is exempt from the status quo at the end of the day. So everyone should be thinking about these things. It is something that you notice one time you were really bad at this and you worked on it and now you're really good at this, right? That can happen to anyone. Nobody's perfect. I got to work it again and again just to make it right. These were the messages of my era of Disney Channel, and that is so wonderful. So, really start questioning these things within yourself. Even as much as you feel like you know, as well off as you feel you may be, there's always more to investigate. And that is the amazing thing.